The buzz of flies filled the still air, a low, angry hum that refused to be silenced. Dust swirled along the trail like restless spirits, curling around the broken wagon and the small, unmoving figure slumped beside it. The sun bore down without mercy, blistering and blinding, and the only shade came from a tattered bonnet that had long since lost its shape. Eliza didn't cry. Not anymore. Her throat had burned raw from screaming 2 nights ago when her mother stopped breathing. She had shaken her, shouted, slapped the fever-slick face. Nothing. Now she sat silent, knees pulled to her chest, watching the flies crawl across her mother's cooling skin. They went for the eyes first. Eliza had covered them with a scarf, but the wind kept tugging it loose. The caravan had left them behind 6 days ago. Her mother's coughing fits had slowed them down too much and water was running low. The wagon master gave her mother a look, one Eliza would never forget, and then they were alone. "Rest a while," her mother had whispered, "we'll catch up after the fever breaks." But the fever hadn't broken. It had burned her mother hollow. Vultures circled above in slow, lazy spirals. Eliza hadn't moved for hours. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth like paper. Her dress clung to her, soaked in sweat and grief. The desert around her was a world of beige and brown, unbroken except for one moving dot on the horizon. It was a man on horseback. She blinked once, thought it a hallucination. But the shape grew larger, steadier, until hoofbeats echoed faintly in her ears. The rider didn't slow. Dust lifted behind him like a ghost's tail. As he approached, she could make out a wide-brimmed hat, a long coat the color of dead leaves, and the glint of metal strapped to his thigh. He stopped 10 feet away. Silence wrapped around them. The horse snorted, pawed the earth once. Eliza looked up, squinting. The man dismounted. His face was angular, shadowed by his hat. One eye was partly closed from an old scar that carved down his cheek. He didn't speak. Just stood there studying the girl, then the corpse. His expression didn't change. No surprise, no pity. Just quiet assessment. Then, without a word, he dropped to one knee and began to dig. Eliza watched, too tired to question it. The earth was hard and dry, resisting each thrust of the spade. He worked steadily, sweat soaking through his shirt. Hours passed. The sun slipped lower. When the hole was deep enough, he gently lifted her mother and laid her in. He said nothing. No prayer. Just covered the body with dirt, patted it flat, and stood. Then he turned to Eliza and held out his hand. She didn't take it. He waited. Finally, she rose to her feet on shaking legs and reached for him. His hand was rough, calloused, and warm. He lifted her onto the saddle, swung up behind her, and nudged the horse forward without a word. The desert swallowed the grave behind them. They rode until the stars came out, blinking into a vast, silent sky. Eliza leaned back against him, listening to the creak of the saddle, the rhythmic clop of hooves. Her body swayed with the motion, but her thoughts spun. Who was he? Why had he stopped? Why hadn't he said a single word? When they made camp, he handed her a piece of dried meat and a canteen. She took them without speaking. He lit a small fire, shielded from the wind by a circle of stones, then sat beside it and cleaned his revolver with slow, deliberate care. The firelight flickered over the gunmetal, casting red shadows on his face. Eliza watched him through the haze of heat and smoke. His movements were precise. Everything he did had purpose. He was the kind of man who didn't waste words or actions. She wanted to ask him his name, but she didn't. That night, she curled up in his duster coat, too big for her small frame, and stared at the stars. She thought of her mother's voice, soft and cracked, telling stories about the constellations. Stories Eliza would never hear again. She bit her lip until it bled, then fell asleep with the taste of iron on her tongue. The next morning, he handed her a scrap of cloth to wrap around her head. The sun would be brutal again. They rode without speaking, stopping only to water the horse at a cracked trough and refill their canteen from a muddy spring. Later that day, as shadows stretched long across the land, they crested a ridge and saw the remains of a town ahead, dry hollow. Buildings sagged like drunks after a fight. The wind carried the smell of dust, rot, and gun oil. A rusted sign swung from one hinge. Welcome to Dry Hollow, population 47 and dropping. They rode into town slow. Faces peeked through dirty windows. A saloon door creaked open and a man stepped out, chewing on a matchstick. "Well, I'll be damned," the man muttered, stepping off the porch. "Ghost shot Carter. Thought you were buzzard bait by now." Eliza felt the man behind her tense just slightly. "You dragging strays now?" the man sneered, nodding at her. Jeb said nothing. "You got business here, Carter?" Another man stepped out of the shadows, gun belt low, fingers twitching near the handle. Eliza felt it before it happened. A ripple in the air. The quiet before a lightning strike. The man, Carter, slid off the horse. He moved smooth like silk over steel. His hand hovered near his hip, but he didn't reach. "You boys don't want this," he said quietly. His voice was low, gravel and thunder. The sneering man laughed. "Ain't your call." Eliza barely saw it happen. One moment she was watching him. The next, smoke bloomed and fire cracked the sky. Two men hit the ground before their guns even cleared leather. Carter spun, gun raised, searching the shadows. "Anyone else?" No one answered. The silence returned. He holstered the revolver and turned to her. She didn't flinch. They left town as quickly as they entered. For hours neither spoke. Finally, as the sun dipped behind the hills and turned the sky the color of old blood, Eliza asked, "Why didn't you just ride past me?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then, softly, "Didn't want to bury too." She looked up at him, startled. It was the first time she'd heard anything like emotion in his voice. That night, they camped beneath a twisted mesquite tree. Coyotes howled in the distance. Eliza couldn't sleep. She rolled over and looked at him across the fire. "Your name?" she said. "It's Carter?" He nodded once. "Thank you," she said. He didn't reply, but his eyes softened. In the silence between them, something shifted. He tossed another log onto the fire, the flames leaping high, casting long shadows behind them. And somewhere in the dark, a rider watched from the hills, hidden behind stone and silence, waiting for dawn. The trail wasn't done with them yet. The desert wind cut sharp that morning, whistling between the narrow rocks as Carter led the horse down a canyon path. Eliza rode silently in the saddle, her small fingers gripping the worn leather horn. Behind them, Dry Hollow was a memory half buried in gun smoke and scorched dust. The dead men's names didn't matter. Neither did their grudges. What mattered was that Carter had drawn blood again. And the girl had seen it. She didn't flinch. Not once. Not when the first man dropped. Not even when the second hit the dust before he could scream. She just stared, eyes wide but dry, as if her innocence had already bled out somewhere on the trail. Carter rode on, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the horizon. Trouble wouldn't be far behind. He could feel it. Gunfire had a way of calling wolves. Bounty men. Old enemies. Ghosts with revolvers. They made it to a half-buried shack near dusk. A low structure of wood and stone nestled against the canyon wall, camouflaged by years of desert neglect. Carter knocked once, twice, then 3 times fast. Pause. Then the sound of a shotgun's hammer cocking. "You bring hell with you again, Carter?" The voice belonged to a woman, rough, older, but not unkind. The door creaked open and Martha Dean stepped out, shawl wrapped tight, eyes narrowed. Her gray hair was braided down her back, and her boots were dust-worn. She looked at Eliza, then back at Carter. "You sure know how to pick your traveling companions." "She needed out of that place," he said. Martha scoffed, stepping aside. "And you needed somewhere to bleed in peace, I reckon." Inside, the cabin was cool, the air thick with herbs and smoke. Eliza blinked in the dim light as Carter slumped into a chair. Blood bloomed across his shirt, seeping from a crease in his side. Martha moved quick, tearing away fabric, examining the wound. "Clean shot through and through. Lucky devil." She handed Eliza a cup of water. "Drink, girl. You look like death rode you twice and spit you out." Eliza sipped, cautiously. Martha turned to Carter. "So who's chasing you this time?" Carter winced as she poured whiskey on the wound. "Might be bounty hunters. Might be ghosts." "Same difference," Martha muttered. They stayed 3 days. In that time, the silence between Carter and Eliza softened. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words held weight. She listened closely, memorizing the gravel in his voice, the way he spoke like every syllable cost him something. On the second night, she crept to the porch and sat beside him beneath a sky scattered with stars. His coat lay across her shoulders, warm with his scent, leather, smoke, and something like cedar. "You were fast," she said, voice small. He didn't look at her. Just kept watching the darkness. "You ever miss?" she asked. His lips twitched into something near a smile. "Once. Didn't live long enough to do it again." She laughed, quiet, unsure if it was a joke or a truth. Maybe both. Were they bad men? Carter's jaw tightened. "Most folks out here are. Including me." "I don't think you are." He didn't respond. But he didn't argue either. Later, after she fell asleep on the porch swing, Martha joined him with a lantern and 2 tin cups. "She's already looking to you," Martha said, handing him one. "She shouldn't." But she is. Carter stared into the cup. I'm not made for keeping anyone alive. Barely managed myself. Martha lit a cigarette, the flame casting shadows across her weathered face. You saved her. You buried her mother. Fed her. Gave her that coat. That's more than most. He drank. The third morning brought thunder, not from the sky but from hooves. Martha heard it first, standing with her rifle across her back. Riders. 4 of them. Fast. Carter didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gun belt and looked to Eliza. You remember what I told you about riding hard? She nodded. Don't stop unless I fall off. And even then think twice. He gave her a short nod. Good girl. They saddled up. Martha stood in the doorway, shotgun in hand. You can't keep running forever, she said. I ain't. Just not dying here. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silver coin and pressed it into her hand. For the medicine. And the porch swing. She smiled thinly. You ever find a reason to stay, bring her back. Girl needs roots. Carter tipped his hat. She needs to keep breathing first. They rode hard, dust rising behind them like smoke signals. By midday they'd put miles between themselves and the cabin. But Carter knew better than to think they'd lost pursuit. The kinds of men who hunted him didn't stop for heat or exhaustion. They stopped for blood or money, whichever came first. They camped in a shallow ravine that night. Eliza sat near the fire, chewing jerky, watching Carter clean his guns. She'd stopped asking questions. Started copying his movements instead. She mimicked how he tied his saddle, how he checked the horizon with his eyes, how he sat always facing the wind. You ever have a daughter? She asked suddenly. He froze. Silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I did. She waited. She was 5. Name was Anna. What happened? Raiders. Burned our place. Took everything. Including her. Eliza stared at him. Did you find them? He nodded slowly. Eventually. She didn't ask what happened then. She didn't have to. The weight in his voice told her enough. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a small cloth bundle and handed it to her. Inside was a carved wooden horse, worn smooth by time and touch. She made it, he said. With her own knife. Kept it with me ever since. Eliza held it gently. It's beautiful. She used to say it could run faster than the wind. They sat in silence after that. The fire crackled low. Coyotes howled in the distance. But Eliza felt safe. For the first time in days, maybe longer, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Morning brought smoke on the horizon. Carter spotted it first. They're burning something. Could be signaling. He packed quickly. We need to move. As they mounted, Eliza clutched the wooden horse tight. You think they'll find us? Maybe. What then? He looked at her, eyes hard. Then they'll wish they hadn't. They pushed north toward the foothills, where old mines carved into the rock offered hiding places and dangers of their own. The trail grew rough, broken by rock slides and narrow ledges. By afternoon, they reached a collapsed bridge where a river had once run wide. Now it was little more than a muddy scar. They crossed on foot, guiding the horse carefully, boots sinking into the muck. On the far side, Carter crouched and ran his fingers through the dirt. Tracks, he muttered. 2 riders. Close. Eliza's eyes widened. What do we do? We keep moving. They pressed on. That night they didn't light a fire. Carter showed her how to tuck into the shadow of the rocks, how to listen for the sound of distant hoofbeats. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. When morning broke, the air was thick with dust. A dry wind rolled across the plains. Carter stood with his rifle slung, eyes fixed west. Time's coming, he said. Eliza stood beside him, holding the wooden horse. What time? He looked down at her, and for the first time his voice cracked just slightly. The time where I stop running. Where we make a stand. Her breath caught in her throat. Are we ready? He studied her face, the dirt smudges, the hollow cheeks, the fire in her eyes. The sky above was ash gray, flat and mean, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and gunpowder. Carter moved slow and steady along the ridge, rifle slung tight against his shoulder, boots crunching over gravel that tried its best to betray him. Behind him, Eliza crouched low, mimicking every step. She was learning fast, too fast for a girl her age, but this land didn't wait for childhood to pass gently. It tore it away like a coyote strips bone from flesh. They'd been watching the cabin below for an hour. Nestled between 2 rock faces, it looked harmless from a distance. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and a single horse stood tethered near the trough. But Carter's eyes were trained on the small shimmer of glass, binoculars, just barely visible in the upstairs window. Scouts, he murmured. Eliza frowned. Bounty hunters? Maybe. Could be worse. Worse than men paid to shoot you? He gave a faint smirk. Yeah. Men who don't need payment at all. She didn't laugh. She just nodded and checked the grip on the small revolver he'd given her 2 days ago. It looked oversized in her hands, but she held it like she meant it. Carter crouched behind a boulder and motioned her down. We flank. You stay with the horse. If it goes bad, you ride north. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at him with the kind of defiance that didn't come from pride. It came from pain. From loss. But she said nothing. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You've got more road left than I do, girl. Don't waste it. Then he was gone, slipping through the rocks like smoke. Eliza waited. Every heartbeat thudded in her ears. She counted the seconds, her fingers curled tight around the reins. The horse shifted beside her, restless. A sharp crack shattered the silence. Gunfire. Then another. Then none. The silence returned too quickly. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to stay hidden, to obey. But something clawed at her, something wild and fierce, and it shoved her out of cover before she realized what she was doing. She scrambled down the ridge, boots sliding on gravel, stumbling toward the cabin. The front door hung open. Smoke drifted lazily from the roof. The single horse was gone. Inside, she found Carter leaning against a wall, blood painting the front of his shirt. 2 men lay dead nearby. One had fallen backward through a chair. The other still clutched his revolver, eyes wide in permanent surprise. Carter looked up as she burst in. Damn it, I told you. You said if it went bad, she snapped, dropping beside him. He winced as she pressed her scarf against the wound. It went bad. You're not dying here. That's the plan. His eyes closed for a second, jaw tight. I was right, he murmured. About what? They weren't bounty men. Eliza froze. Then who? Marrow's crew, he said. Saw the mark on one of them. Cross teeth. Bastards used to run with him. Her breath caught. She'd heard the name in whispers. Marrow, the man who'd burned half the West without a conscience, a knife fighter turned gang lord. Carter had told her once about a fire. About a child. He never said Marrow by name, but now she knew. I thought he was dead, she whispered. He was supposed to be. Guess hell spit him back out. Carter shifted, groaning. Blood was pooling beneath him. Eliza yanked a rag from her bag, hands trembling. I need to stitch this, she said. He gave a faint nod, teeth clenched. She worked in silence, just like he'd shown her. Thread, needle, pressure, don't hesitate. The wound was deep, but it missed the ribs. Luck, or maybe some mercy from the same God who'd ignored them the last few weeks. When it was done, Carter leaned back, his breath ragged. You did good, he muttered. I had a good teacher. She sat back, wiping sweat from her brow. We need to move, he said. You can't ride like this. We don't have a choice. If Marrow knows I'm alive, if he knows you're with me, he won't stop. Why would he care about me? Carter hesitated. Your leverage. She blinked. Against who? He looked at her, then truly looked. Against me. That night, they made camp in a ravine hidden by high stone walls. Carter lay beneath a blanket, fever rising despite the cool night air. Eliza sat beside him, feeding the fire, one small stick at a time. Why didn't you tell me before? She asked. He didn't respond. About Marrow. I didn't want to see you scared. I'm not. His eyes opened. You should be. She reached into the saddlebag and pulled out the wooden horse. Did he kill Anna? Carter looked at the flames. No. He ordered it. That's different. No, it's not. His mouth pulled tight. No. It's not. They sat in silence for a long while. Coyotes howled in the distance. The stars blinked above like distant watchers. Finally, Carter spoke. I spent years chasing him. Killed a lot of men along the way. Thought revenge would fix something. Did it? He shook his head. It just made me hollow. She looked down at the horse in her hands. Maybe you were hollow before. His eyes met hers. And maybe you still are, she added, soft. But you're not alone now. Carter didn't reply. But for the first time in days he slept without flinching. The next morning brought the sound of distant hooves. Not close yet, but closing in. They rode again, Carter weak but determined, Eliza steady in the saddle beside him. They crossed dried riverbeds, skirted abandoned mining trails, and rode through a forest of charred trees, Scars left behind by a wildfire. Marrow once started to smoke out a rival gang. Each mile was heavier. That afternoon, Carter dismounted and handed her the reins. "You keep going." She stared at him. "No. This is where I stop. You're not doing this." "Yes, I am. I won't let you." He knelt to her level. "You've got grit, but you're still just a kid. And kids don't take bullets meant for ghosts. I'm not leaving." He took a deep breath, wincing as his side pulled. "If I don't end this now, he'll keep hunting. Not just me. Anyone I stand beside. I am beside you." He smiled faintly. "I know." And then the shot rang out. Eliza screamed as Carter collapsed. Blood bloomed again across his shirt. Another shot hit the dirt near her boots. She grabbed the revolver and fired back blindly, dragging Carter behind a rock outcrop. The shot stopped. Silence stretched long and cruel. Carter coughed, blood on his lips. "Eliza, listen, he's here. Marrow, he wants me. Not you. I don't care what he wants. You can still get out." She pressed her forehead to his. "So can you." A shadow moved in the distance. Then a voice, deep and cold, echoed across the ravine. "Well now, if it ain't the prodigal ghost." Carter opened one eye, face pale. "Marrow." The voice laughed. "You owe me, Carter. Thought you'd die easy. Guess we both misjudged." Eliza stood, revolver shaking in her grip. "You want him," she shouted. "You come through me." Pause. Then the laughter came again, darker. "Well, damn, looks like the girl's got teeth." The next shot didn't come from Marrow. It came from behind him. And someone screamed. "No," he said. "But we'll do it anyway." And with that, they headed into the wind, side by side. The rider in black was already close. The echo of the shot tore through the canyon like a whip crack from God himself. Marrow spun, stumbling sideways as a bullet slammed into his shoulder. Dust exploded around his boots as he hit the dirt, cursing and snarling like a wounded animal. Behind him, a figure emerged from the treeline, tall, long-coated, rifle steady. Eliza barely understood what she was seeing. The man moved with a calm she'd only ever seen in Carter. No wasted steps, no panic. Just deadly certainty. Marrow's men, two of them, burst from behind the rocks, answering the ambush with wild, desperate fire. The stranger dropped low and fired again. One of them spun mid-sprint, shot through the thigh and crumpled. The other tried to flank. He didn't make it 3 steps before he too was dropped. Eliza stayed frozen beside Carter, gripping his hand, feeling his blood seep through her fingers. "You still with me?" she whispered. His eyes fluttered open. "Mostly. Help's here. I think." Carter's eyes narrowed as the rifleman approached. "That can't be." The stranger knelt beside them, face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His voice was gravel and whiskey. "Name's Ellis," he said. "I owed your friend a debt." Carter coughed, pain streaking through every breath. "You picked a hell of a time to pay it." Eliza pressed harder against his wound. "Can you ride?" she asked Ellis, eyes hard. "I can ride," he replied. "But you've got something bigger than a ride ahead of you." Marrow's groaning cut through the rocks. The bastard wasn't dead. Not yet. He crawled, teeth bared, blood painting his jacket like a war shroud. Ellis looked to Carter. "Want me to finish him?" Carter shook his head. "No. Eliza should choose." Her breath hitched. "What?" Carter looked at her, eyes filled with something weightier than blood or pain. "He's your enemy now. He'd kill you without blinking. You deserve the say." She rose slowly, gun in hand. Her feet carried her forward like they were no longer hers. Marrow lifted his head, eyes burning. "Little rat," he spat. "You think you're something special? I've buried girls tougher than you in unmarked graves." She said nothing. The revolver in her grip felt cold, heavier than ever. "You're no killer," Marrow hissed. "You're a child with a toy. You pull that trigger and you lose what's left of yourself." Her hands trembled. Behind her, Carter whispered, "He's not wrong." Eliza's eyes welled. "I don't want to be like him." "You're not," Carter said, "because you're hesitating." Her grip steadied. She stepped forward. And then she holstered the gun. "No," she said. "You don't get to die easy." Ellis stepped forward, pulled a pair of iron cuffs from his saddlebag. "Well, I didn't expect that." Eliza nodded toward Marrow. "Take him. Let him rot." Carter exhaled. Relief. Maybe even pride. They moved quickly after that. Ellis helped lift Carter onto the horse, tied Marrow tight, and led the group north, toward the distant town of Gallows Ford. The law was thin there, but it still existed. Enough to bury a man like Marrow under every crime he'd ever committed. As they rode, Eliza kept glancing back, not toward Marrow but toward the life she'd left behind on the trail. The girl sobbing beside her mother's lifeless body, she was gone now. Not forgotten but transformed. Shed like a skin. She looked at Carter. He was fading in and out, mumbling fragments of memory. And his name. A burning house. The dry scrape of guilt clinging to every breath. That night, they camped under a canopy of pine. The fire burned low, and Ellis stood watch with eyes like a man who'd seen too many sunrises. Eliza sat beside Carter, feeding him sips of water, watching the color return to his cheeks. I should have told you sooner, he rasped. About Marrow? About everything. She shook her head. You told me enough. He turned toward her. You still got the wooden horse? She pulled it from her saddlebag and placed it in his hand. You kept it. Of course I did. Carter smiled faintly, running a thumb over the worn carving. I carved it for Anna. She loved horses. She still does, Eliza said softly. Wherever she is. They sat in silence. Above them, the stars pulsed with cold light. The wind whispered through the trees. Ellis returned from his patrol and tossed another log onto the fire. You two are a strange pair, he said. Carter grunted. Ain't that the truth? Ellis nodded toward Eliza. You planning to keep riding? She shrugged. Where to? Anywhere but back. Carter's voice was quiet. She's not just riding. She's surviving. Eliza looked into the flames. No, she said. I'm living. The next morning they reached Gallows Ford. The sheriff, a wiry, weather-beaten man with a limp, took one look at Marrow and called in 2 deputies. Within the hour the outlaw was behind iron bars. The town was small, nothing but dust and wooden facades. But it had clean water, medicine, and quiet. Carter was taken to a doctor who patched him up proper. 3 bullets in a month had left his body a mess of scar tissue and bruised ribs, but he was alive. That was more than he'd expected. Eliza sat outside the jailhouse watching the sun rise. Her boots were dust-caked. Her hat sat crooked on her head. But her eyes were steady. The sheriff stepped out, lighting a pipe. Heard you made the choice, he said. She nodded. Most would not have. She didn't reply. Not a lot of mercy left in this world, he added. That's why it matters. He looked at her, eyes narrowing with quiet respect. You ever think about staying here? I've thought about a lot of things. And? I'm not done riding yet. Later that week, Carter joined her outside the saloon, bandaged and stiff but upright. You sure you want to keep going? He asked. Eliza mounted her horse. You taught me how to survive. But there's more to living than hiding from ghosts. Carter smiled, weathered and warm. Guess I'll ride a little farther then? She tilted her head. You sure? You're looking awful gray around the beard. He chuckled. Smartass. They rode out of Gallows Ford under a sky so blue it hurt the eyes. The wind at their backs carried the scent of wildflowers and freedom. As they crested a hill, Eliza looked down at the plains stretching ahead, untamed, uncertain, and wide as forever. She thought of her mother's hand going still beneath hers. Of the days spent starving. Of the nights spent clutching a wooden horse. Of Carter's silence, his gruff care, his broken past. She thought of the girl she used to be. And the one she was becoming. You all right? Carter asked. She turned to him. I will be. They kept riding. Behind them the dust settled. Ahead, the trail bent into the horizon, waiting. And for the first time, Eliza didn't fear where it would lead.